Hello everyone, and welcome to Galaxy 89 Cars. In today's video, I'm going to be exploring one of the new exterior and interior features of the new 2020 Porsche 718 Cayman GT4. Before actually driving 718 GT4, I want to focus on some of the main aero changes, and of course the new powertrain. At the front, the form is generally the same, with the extended and redesigned front splitter that helps to produce more downforce and direct air towards the undercar diffuser thanks to its special golf ball-like texture on its underside. Moving around, there are new air curtains behind the front wheels that control the flow of air away from the disruptive front wheels and add further downforce at the front. Moving back, the rear wing has been redesigned and now creates up to 20% more downforce than that in its predecessor. Underneath the car, there's a much larger diffuser and new ducts that help to suck the car to the ground, producing as much as 30% of the rear aero. All of these changes result in 718 GT4 producing 50% more downforce than its predecessor, a total of 122 kilograms of downforce, an increase of 12 kilograms just at the rear. Now we can focus on the car's enhanced engine. 718 GT4 is powered by a naturally aspirated, mid-rear mounted 4-litre flat 6 that's based on the new 3-litre 911 engine. This is an increase of 200 cc's on its predecessor, and with that increase comes more power. 718 GT4 produces 414 brake horsepower and 420 Nm of torque, an increase of 30 brake horsepower and the same torque figure, although it can now be delivered much higher in the rev range. This new output produces the same 0 to 62 mph or 100 km/h time of 4.4 seconds and an enhanced top speed of 188 mph, increased by 5 mph. Moving to the interior briefly, GT4 follows generally the same layout as the other 718 models. In terms of the main differences to 981, this means raised air vents, a recessed sport chrono timer on the dash and a new infotainment display. I've gone through all of the exterior and interior changes, including the sort of model overview, power output, etc. I think it's about time we see kind of how these things manifest themselves in the driving of the car. Now, I'm not obviously Chris Harris, I'm not pretending to be Chris Harris, but I do drive a lot of cars, so I'm going to try and give as much feedback and insight into what driving this car is like. This is the key, very similar design to the other keys. In some other models, the key has been sort of thrown away completely and there's just a little starter. One thing I noticed is that the insert, the port for the key is illuminated, which can kind of help guide where you need to put it when it's dark, which is actually a really nice feature. So basically you have to put it in, slot it in, and then turn it. I always wait to hear everything, all the noises to stop. Clutch and brake in. There we go, the car has started. Now that was without the sports exhaust on, no kind of sport mode or anything like that. So the very first thing I want to talk about is the clutch. Now, I had this fear, I had this worry in my mind that the clutch was going to be sort of intolerably hard and I wouldn't be able to push it down basically. I don't know why I thought that, but I thought in a Porsche GT product it's basically going to be a race car, it's going to be very difficult. Actually the clutch is fine. It is stiff in comparison to, you know, something you know, maybe like a BMW 1 Series or 2 Series or a Vauxhall or, you know, Ford Fiesta, Ford Escort, something like that. But it's definitely very usable. And the things I like about it is the gears are very short throw, of course. So you don't have a lot of room to move, which is a good thing. And also the clutch can be depressed quite far in, but then you can find the bite point very easily. I've only struggled a couple of times to find the bite point. Generally, it's actually been okay. So anyway, starting off, going to first, too simple. As with any manual car, got to hear what's going on. Hear the bite of the clutch. And then we can just go. So that's the first gear change on camera. That's just first to second. Very short throw. The gear stick itself is pretty tiny. It's only probably about 4 inches, maybe 3 inches, something like that. It's very, very small. Coated in Alcantara, as is everything. I do actually wonder what gear I should be in sometimes, because the car is quite loud, and sort of when I look at the rev counter, which is directly ahead, You know, I often just see, you know, like 1500, 2000 RPM. This can go all the way up to 8000. That's where the red line is on this car. I just got to mind myself here because there's a little buggy. At the moment, like I said, no sports exhaust on, nothing like that. Then we can move on to steering. Now, I don't think this has any kind of formal driving modes as such. The car is set up in its kind of standard way. You've got adaptive dampers, but on this one I'm pretty sure that's all there is. Now, the steering wheel is a very nice piece with any Porsche. It's basic. It's just Alcantara, contrast stitching, and a contrast 12 o'clock marker. That's it. That's all you need. And I love when steering wheels are like this. There's nothing else to fiddle about with. I'm quite sort of maybe old-fashioned in that respect. I like tech, but I also like things to be trimmed down. Behind it, you've got a couple of stalks. The main one is the one to the bottom right that controls the right side of the sort of instrument display ahead. So on the right side we have digital display, lots of information that I can show you, speed limit, vehicle information, the jukebox, sat nav, navigation, the trip, tyre pressure monitor, chrono timer, gear change assistance, G-force, and the performance meter. I've got it on the speed limit at the moment, just so I can remind myself not to go too quickly. Back to steering. Unlike something like a McLaren, for example, which I think has hydraulic steering, this has something like mechanical steering. There's two main features I've noticed with this steering. The first is that there's definite resistance in the wheel. So it sort of counters this kind of power steering plus type feeling that I felt in other cars, mainly SUVs. There's definitely more resistance, but there's also a strange lightness. It sounds like a sort of oxymoron. It sounds like it's impossible, but there definitely is. You have to put some effort in to move the wheel, but then at the same time, there's a strange lightness to it that makes the car very agile. Kind of what the sort of main like autocar Evo journalist has been talking about. I can sort of see that for myself driving this. Moving from steering, we can go into driving position. I'm not sure exactly how my driving position looks through the camera at the moment, but I know I've got myself quite close to the steering wheel. That's basically just because I want to ensure that I have full length of travel on the clutch. I want to make sure I can push it right to the back and have a little bit of bend in my leg. I don't want my leg to be completely extended. I've actually got a bit of a problem in my left knee. I think it's with my ACL. So I have a bit of weakness in there sometimes. So I just want to make sure that I can sort of drive the car properly and not have to worry about stalling and hill starts, that sort of stuff, and sort of like really reaching for the clutch in certain situations. But in the driving position I've got with these of course are the carbon-backed bucket seats. They are optional. The other ones, I think there are 14-way and then 18-way. There's definitely, I'm sure, 14-way. They're a lot more comfortable, kind of like typical Cayman Boxster seats. These are firm, they're very supportive. You feel kind of like this a little bit because obviously the lateral supports, but they are still comfortable. I've been driving around now for about 2 hours, pretty much non-stop. I've been sitting in this seat pretty much non-stop for about 2 hours, and I'm pretty comfortable. I don't have any numb parts like you do when you're sitting in the cinema. You may have numb legs, numb buttocks, the lower of your back may start to hurt. I don't really have any of that in here. And so you can get a little bit sort of uncomfortable just because it's quite a rigid thing that you're sitting on. But overall, they're comfortable. I've had to raise the seat up as well because I like to be able to kind of see more, but if you want to, you can have the seat right down. That's the good thing about this. Usually in bucket seats, you only have manual forward and backwards controls. In this, you have electric up and down controls as well, so you can raise them quite a lot. I've raised them because I just like, this is the first time in this car. It's a brand new GT product with Porsche themselves. I don't want to take any sort of risks, shall we say. So I just want to make sure I have a good view out of the front. Setting up the mirrors was easy. Of course, we do that just down here. The side mirrors give a very nice view over the arches out of the rear and also provide really decent visibility. Rear visibility is obscured a bit by the wing. It's not too much though. It's like just a small thing in the middle I'll show you. But I mean, I feel like this is quite a small space, and that's sort of aided by having the big front arches going over the the front wheels, so you can kind of more easily place where the front of the car is because of those arches, and then you can see what's going on either side, I think really well from the wing mirrors. Let's put our foot down a little bit. So that's just second to third. I've been in second this entire time. Just going up a little bit. These roads are terrible. It's very wet and very muddy where I am, and the roads are slippery, and these are Cup 2 tyres, so I want to be careful with them. I don't want to, like I said, I need to be really careful. But I want to try out the auto blip function and the sports exhaust as well, because at the moment the valve's closed. So before we get onto that, I think I'll talk about the brakes. This car has the optional Porsche carbon ceramic brakes. You can tell by the yellow calipers. It's also on the options list. Quite an expensive option. I think this is, other than the Hurricane I drove last year, I think this is the first time I've driven with ceramic brakes. What do I feel about them? They're very squeaky at the beginning. They're quite grabby at the beginning, but you get used to them very quickly. You notice, because the pedals are they're kind of fitted in so well. The sort of setup of the pedals and sort of how you use them is kind of built in by Porsche so well that you can modulate them very easily, at least in my opinion. And I'm used to driving a very, very basic car day to day. It's a manual, nothing like this, but I've gone from that to this very, very easily. So I think anyone could probably do it as well. You notice that you really don't have to put your foot down very much at all to get any braking, really. When you're moving at very slow speeds, it's literally just the tiniest amount of pedal modulation will create a full stop, but a gradual, not like a sudden full stop, unless you just put your foot down. And then of course that will do that. When you're going more at speed, once again, very soft modulation of the pedal. That's all you need to create actual braking. Now we're going into a 60 mph speed limit zone here. I'm going to put the sports exhaust on, and I'm also going to put the auto blip on as well, to kind of hopefully give you an idea of how this sounds a bit. So, I'm going to get into a straight. Like I said, it's still very wet, very muddy around here. Right, let's try. This is going to be So let's go back and think about the changes it actually makes for the driver sitting in the car. What does it actually do? So I'm in third at the moment, quite low revs. Go to second. Right, so this is where the valve closed. It's already, for me at least, as the driver, it's quite loud in here actually. You can definitely tell this is quite a raw sports car. So. And also, I was braking then, I don't know if you could hear, but when I was looking that way, you can really hear the brakes grabbing. Like, very noticeable. Anyway, back to the exhaust. So, auto blip on. So that's the valves off. When you touch the button, when you're driving along, basically you can't hear any difference. I don't think you can notice that either. And I don't think from inside the cabin there's going to be a huge amount of difference. So I've got someone in like a Scirocco GTI or whatever that is trying to race me now. That's the problem with these cars. Someone sees it and they automatically think you're up for racing everywhere. That's definitely not the case. Yeah, there's not a huge amount of difference. And that's the thing with these particulate filters that this has. The other one didn't, the 981 GT4 didn't. This has a particulate filter. Particle filter, it really, makes a big difference. The old 6-cylinder, the 3.8, was so crackly because it had a freer exhaust. this has been kind of blocked up a bit, so you've lost some of the sound. You can hear it when you idle, and I'm going to give a good example of that. Roads were dry and it was warm, then I'd probably push the car a bit more and we could probably hear a bit more from the exhaust. But for now at least, can't hear a huge amount of difference when you're driving. I've spoken about how the seats themselves feel, but how does the ride quality of the car feel? Well, this of course has basically the setup of the GT3, so it's going to be hard, and I'm sure you can tell by the amount I've been sort of jumping around in my seat, because the roads are kind of poor quality as well where I was driving. But it's undeniably very, very firm. You know, there's basically no roll whatsoever. There's no sort of lunging forward or rearing up. There's a little bit of lift actually under hard accelerating. The front does go a little bit light. You can feel it lift up a bit. But generally speaking, the car is planted. The suspension is very, very hard. Now there's an adaptive damper button here that says put it into sport. That has actually firmed up the steering feel as well, and you can tell automatically the car is completely flat now when I'm just sort of moving around a bit. You can feel it as soon as it's sort of like when you get to about 10% or 10 degrees motion in the wheel, you can feel each side is resisting the roll as much as possible. And then it's then the steering wheel, the steering feel itself also tightens up. So yeah, this is definitely a car that you can probably enjoy a couple of days a week. I think you would have to be a very specific type of person to be able to enjoy this every single day. But you could definitely take it out a couple of times a week, really enjoy it. If the weather's great, take it out for a really, really long run out through the countryside or something, or a long tour. But I suppose the points against that is because it's quite loud and the seats, at least in this spec, are quite hard, so I think it might sap energy from you a little bit. And of course working the clutch, it's not, like I said, it's not too hard, but you still need to sort of modulate it quite a bit. I think that's pretty much everything I can say about the new 2020 718 GT4. I absolutely adore this car. I would take this car over pretty much everything else I've driven. And I know I say that a couple of times, the LC500 as well, that was a very decent car, but I absolutely love this. I saw one of these, well, a 981 GT4 when they first came out, and I thought it was aesthetically one of the prettiest things I've ever seen on four wheels. And after driving this, I have to say that, yeah, it's incredible. Slightly muted sound, which is a little bit disappointing, but other than that, absolutely amazing. So huge thank you to Porsche GB for allowing me this opportunity. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you've learned a little bit from it. Please subscribe for the latest content, and until next time, thanks for watching.